Hi and welcome. I'm excited to welcome you back to this podcast. Today we have a guest, Jessica Darling, who will be talking to us about some things that do go beyond sleep, but are so important to the whole journey of parenthood, especially in the early years. Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited to delve in. I wonder if you could start by sharing with people who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Yes, so I am a postpartum and prenatal strength coach. I do in-person and online training, and I'm all about supporting moms and birthing parents through this journey of life, through pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond, because it really is, it can be isolating, it can be a tricky season of life to navigate. And so I'm all about helping people continue and start movement throughout that journey so that they can feel strong and be the best version of themselves.
That's great. And when we were talking earlier before the podcast, you were mentioning this big shift that happens after you've had a baby. Whether you are an athlete beforehand or haven't done a lot of movement, there's a lot that shifts physically and beyond. And I wonder if you could touch on that.
Yeah, so a little about my story. So I've got a daughter, Ruby. She is almost 3. And, before having her, I was an athlete. I used to be a varsity rower. I was a competitive cyclist. I love strength training. And so my identity was really wrapped up in being this active person. And during my pregnancy, I had a bit of a rough go. I ended up having HG, which is where you're very sick the whole time. So I couldn't really be active, and who I thought of myself as, I was no longer that person. And so coming out of it, I really sort of felt disjointed. Who am I if I can't be this active person? And finding a way to get back to movement that was safe and accessible was hard. Things are changing now, but there isn't always a lot of support for postpartum women maintaining movement. Your body is different. It has changed a lot in the course of 9 months, and you can't just, I'm doing air quotes, bounce back into, the body that you were before. And especially if that has been your identity, there can be a lot of guilt around not being able to, quote unquote, do what you're supposed to be able to do, or what you want to be able to do. And so just being able to let go of that identity and start where you're at is really important, and can be quite challenging. And so yes, I work with clients in terms of getting you moving and getting you strong, but there's also a piece of just like acceptance of the new you, because you're different.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that idea of starting where you're at, because that level of frustration or futility of either having been a former athlete or an athlete prior to becoming a parent, and then having to rejig this new body, rejig your new priorities, rejig the time availability that you have as you're parenting a young baby, can be challenging. But I'm also picturing, for many of us, me included, semi-active, like relatively active before becoming a parent, but I certainly wasn't, in the athletic realm. And to be able to even rejig what my entire identity is as a parent while still taking care of myself was a big leap for me.
Yeah, it can be a big shock. And I got a piece of advice early on that changed my life, quite literally. This wonderful postpartum fitness instructor, Jessica Sennett, she said, all postpartum bodies are beginner bodies. And I think that is a piece of information that is so critical, especially if you have been very active before. There's a tendency to want to just jump right back in and get to what you were doing before. But you have to remember that birth, no matter how you have it, vaginally or C-sectionally, birth is trauma, and it takes time for your body to heal. And so no matter how fit you were before, you have to start at the beginning. You have to let your body heal and slowly rebuild. Now, if you were quite active before, chances are you're going to get back to that state faster than somebody who hadn't been very active. But that was a big release for me, just in hearing that it's okay to start at the bottom. You're not, stop comparing yourself to your past self. You're different, not only in your physically, mentally, but also your schedule and your time. As you're saying, you don't have an hour or more to get to a gym, to do a workout, and just being able to give yourself permission to be in that state is important.
I love that advice that you quoted, that all postpartum bodies are beginner bodies. What a release of expectations around that guilt that you mentioned. I hadn't even thought about that being a layer of it, that feeling of guilt of not being able to do what you were doing before or not having time to do it. I know for me, I was prioritizing myself pretty low down on the hierarchy. And even when it came to physical exercise, in that first year, especially the first, several months, I felt like every time I was doing something like that for me, I was taking away from all that connection and attachment and face-to-face interaction with my baby that was so valuable for me as well. I wonder if you can explore that a little bit, just in terms of how to find this. I'm reluctant even to call it a balance. I feel like it's more of a journey of figuring out how to meet the needs of this little baby in front of you, while also knowing that taking care of yourself is a huge part of being able to fill this new role that we have.
Yes, I liken it to, and I'm sure this analogy has been used many times, but the safety advice on the plane, like put your own oxygen mask on first before you help your child, because if you can't take care of you, you can't help anyone else. My daughter was like a stage 5 clinger. We were very much attachment style. She was on me all the time, and it was hard. It was hard to get movement in. I felt, gosh, so guilty, just like not holding on to her. So there's like a couple of things here that you can carry over into that movement piece. One, if you've got a wonderful baby like mine who always wants to be held, I did a lot of walking. So a lot of walking with baby on you is a great way to start to rebuild the core musculature, because baby is growing and getting heavier every day. That is helping build you progressively. And then also, if that's not you and you want that dedicated, or you need that dedicated time away from baby, this is where having that really strong support system can help, so that you have, even if it's only 30 minutes to be by yourself and you're really in control. For me, a lot of my struggles around parenting, especially in the early days, was like I felt like I didn't have control over anything. When I slept, when I was, going to the washroom, it was all dictated by what my baby needed. And I wish I had someone to say to me, like, it's okay to just take a little bit of time for yourself. I know that I would have been, I don't want to say a better parent, but it would have really helped recharge and re-energize me if I had more regular moments to just be in my own existence without my baby. And I eventually learned that later on, and part of that was just the guilt. Like I just felt so guilty being away from her, and that's where I just want to say it's taking care of yourself is so important. And that might look different depending on, what you need. Maybe it is going to the gym alone for 30 minutes. Maybe it's just doing 20 minutes of yoga or some quiet meditation, right? I think especially in the early postpartum days, taking care of yourself and your body doesn't have to be some vigorous activity.
Lovely. Well, and I love this idea of taking apart or unpacking this lack of control that we often feel as we become parents. Because up until parenthood, we do have we may not think about how much control we have, but we do have a lot of control of how we spend our time, what we do with our body, what movement we do, what sports we can be involved in, whether we're weight training. And then with the parenthood piece, you've boiled it right down to you don't even have control over when you sleep. And in some respects, you don't have control over when you eat. There are some times where you literally can't eat because your hands are quite literally full of a dirty diaper or a very upset baby. And that lack of control, in addition to this huge shift in identity towards parenthood, can really make things feel quite a lot wobblier than we're used to. When I think about how, you're describing your daughter as like stage 5 clinger, I had one too. That was a stage 5 clinger. And I felt the guilt of even just putting him down. And I still remember, and your advice of being able to create something unique and individual, that it's going to look different for everyone, but that it's still important to find that piece so that you're putting that oxygen mask on first. And I remember the first class I took was a yoga class. It was a baby and mom yoga class. So I didn't have to leave my baby with someone else. I still got to have healthy movement. I got the social aspect of it too, which I think I had not realized how valuable it was to be in another room with other parents and their babies, just for some perspective and some camaraderie.
That's so, so important. I also teach classes for mom and babies through a company called Mighty Mom, and that is really the whole philosophy behind it. It's hard to move your body. How are you going to find somebody to watch your child? So you just bring your kid with you, and you're surrounded by people who are going through the exact same thing as you. They know what's going on, and there's a real camaraderie in that, and just validation, I think, in being with other moms who know exactly the struggles that you're experiencing.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, and I also wonder, when you think back to those early months where the sleep was not going very smoothly, the intense contact that Ruby needed because she found comfort in your arms, when you think of letting go of that control, that image that perhaps you had of what you could be doing as a new parent, do you have any insights on how to get to that point where instead of fighting against what the reality is, which is that your time is looking very different, your priorities are different and in some ways in conflict with each other, any insights or lessons learned from that intense period on just letting go?
Yes. So my sort of mantra to myself was, this is my only job. So my baby contact napped all of it. She still doesn't sleep by herself very well. And so instead of, sitting on the couch with baby on me, not being able to move and being frustrated that gosh, this is all I can do, I literally told myself, this is your job. This is your job for the next 6 months, maybe a year. I don't know. And that really helped shift my perspective instead of, I'm not being as productive as I could be, seeing it through the lens of, this is all I have to do right now. I just have to be here for this baby. Really helped me prioritize, and then also remind me that this isn't forever. So once I sort of came to terms with that, I put aside the expectation of getting back to movement and, it's been 8 weeks, I can exercise again. I really shifted my priorities to her and what she needed, which helped me relax and release any of that guilt. And then, before you knew it, I was able to get back to movement, find an exercise class that worked with me, and continue on my journey. So that would be my advice. Just try to let go of the shoulds and the expectations of what you should be doing, and really tune into what do you value right now, and what are your priorities, and put your energy into there knowing that this isn't forever and you can get back to integrate movement and exercise. There will be time for that, but it's really about not putting too much pressure and expectation on you, especially in the early days when you're not sleeping. It's just going to make it worse to add one more thing that you have to do, quote unquote.
And you've used the phrase right now. This is my priority right now. And what a great perspective that is to remind us that this isn't forever, that the priority that's right in front of us may need to be the numero uno, like number one big priority, and everything, at least right now, comes second or third or fourth or fifth. It doesn't mean it's not on the list, but it means that this baby in front of you is like number one for a reason. There's no one else that is better able to meet their needs in this moment. And because it's not an or, it's an and you can find ways to move your body at a time when your body is still recovering from a significant trauma and your identity is going through a major shift. And your time, I have to chuckle because when I became a parent and I was picturing being at home with a baby for an entire year, having never had a period of time where I didn't have employment or full-time school, like full-time employment or full-time school, I had this image that clearly with that many hours at home, I would be able to learn to play the guitar. And I soon realized that no, forget, lifting weights or learning how to do a new sport. I couldn't even find time to pick up the guitar, let alone learn how to do a few chords. So the reframing of the expectations too can be a really big surprise. And I don't think when I think about, your story as a competitive rower and competitive cyclist and varsity level rower versus me, who was kind of the intramural kind of level, I don't even think it may look different at the start and your goals and priorities may take a little bit of a different shift, but the huge chasm between pre-baby and post-baby would be big no matter what kind of athletic mover you are before or after pregnancy.
Absolutely. I think pregnancy and motherhood is like the ultimate leveler. Everybody is going through it, and no matter where you come from or your background's, like, we're all struggling the same way. It's a good struggle, I would say, but especially that first child, it will rock your world in a way that, like, people tell you, but you can never really understand it until you experience it. And I think it's important to say it's okay. Like, we all felt that way that first time. It's just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? And you will, yeah. And you do.
Yeah. Well, and I think about what I've seen on your social media in terms of the weightlifting that you're doing, the short reels that you have on there. And I think even for me, very far beyond that postnatal period now. My youngest is now 9. And even now, there are shifts in how I'm able to prioritize my time alone, that alone time that you talked about, but prioritize my physical fitness too. I mean, part of the reason that I got you on is seeing those lifts that you were doing and being personally excited about my own weightlifting. I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the idea of how to manage goal setting from that physical athletic perspective in terms of moving our bodies in this new, postnatal body and postnatal time and priority piece, when the goals that you might have may feel less ambitious than before baby because of these competing priorities. There's interference in your ability to have control over achieving those goals because of a really rough night of sleep, for example. Like if you're running on 3 hours of interrupted sleep versus, a nice juicy 8 hours of sleep, that goal setting is going to look quite different too. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? It's going to be so personal. But I think no matter where you're starting from, your first priority and first goal should really be to rebuild foundational strength, rebuild that core. And you're going to be starting from not zero, but starting from the bottom and really focusing on, I do this with all of my clients, is focusing on your breath, relearning how to breathe with your diaphragm, making sure your deep abdominal core muscles are working together as a unit. During pregnancy, that core rearranges itself, right? Organs get shifted around, ribs move. The way the muscles in your core work together shifts significantly during pregnancy. And so the first thing that we want to do in terms of getting back to exercise is get everything talking together and working in their intended manner. So I think that, yes, it seems like a smaller goal, but it's really, really going to set you up for success. So goal one, how can I restore core functionality? And then, so you reference some of my Instagram stuff. I decided postpartum that I wanted to try Olympic lifting, which is it's a hard sport. It requires strength and finesse, and it was a humbling. I did it for six months and realized that it was too much. It was too much for me at this stage in my life, and it was hard to admit. It took me about a month or so to really come to terms with the fact that I can't do this right now. I can't do this with, running my own business, starting something new, taking care of my daughter. It was too much extra stress on my body. And so I think that's an important piece when you are goal setting. Start slow and then reevaluate frequently. If something isn't working, it's okay to say, I got to pause this. I've got to adjust my goal, dial it back a little bit. I think that is a common experience postpartum and I'm almost 3 years out, right? And so just revisiting, and yes, it's hard, but always sort of evaluating and understanding the amount of capacity you have based on your life now. So time, energy, sleep is a huge, huge one. So my daughter doesn't sleep very well, so I don't get a lot of uninterrupted sleep, and recognizing that for me, that's a limiter. Yeah, I can't do a lot of really high intensity, heavy lifting on the kind of sleep that I'm getting. So I've had to, readjust my program to reflect that.
Neat. Well, and when you talk about a few things that you bring up there that I think are worth really highlighting, and the first is the start slow with goals. I think especially at a time in our lives in early parenthood and adjusting to new roles, the idea of like going big and going hard, like getting back there or leaping ahead, means that when there are things that are beyond our control, which is often the case in parenthood, then we're left feeling discouraged because we're nowhere near the goal that we set for ourselves, which can feel very disappointing. We might feel like we're just not measuring up to even our own standards of where we want to be. But when we start slowly and it's within reach, then we're getting to have the satisfaction of achieving something that's actually within the realm of possibility at a time in our life when there are so many other things that we don't get to control.
Yes, exactly. It's better. Sorry to jump in here, but I just had a meeting with a new client yesterday. She's like, well, how many times a week should I work out? Should I work out 4? I was like, start with 2. Once you can do 2 and feel like, okay, I'm crushing this, I want more, like that's the energy I want you to be in, to be feeling like this is easy to fit in, now give me more, versus, oh my God, I only got 1 of my 4 workouts in, I'm a failure, right? And you're not. So it's about setting expectations. I always say go slow to go fast, right? Start slow and then you can build.
Yeah. Well, and that's been my experience too, because as, you know, again, I'm a long way past postpartum period. But when I think about when I started doing weight training and I was like 3 days of hit for 15 minutes, that's all I have time for. And then to gradually, like months and months, move beyond that to working with weights 4 times a week and thinking, gosh, that's a stretch, but it's, you know, it's a little bump up from 3. And then I started like craving working out more on the days that I wasn't working out. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm ready to bump it up again. But there is no way I would be lifting what I'm lifting as often as I am if I didn't start out with just 3 times a week for 15 minutes within reach. Oh, it's hard though, isn't it? Because you think just go big. Like this is where I want to be, so I'm just going to sprint there. And there is no sprint. I mean, even without having kids, you can't sprint to the finish line. It's a buildup of work. But when you've got a baby at home, when you're sleep deprived, putting something just out of reach instead of a long way off, it certainly helped me, because when I'm still really quite pleased at that feeling in me when I was craving working out on the days that I didn't plan to work out. If I didn't get my whole workout in the day before, I was actually really glad that I got a little bit to do the next day. When I think about the families that I work with, where obviously sleep is the theme, the major theme, and I think about how important sleep is to optimal health, and that push and pull that we can have around knowing that sleep is healthy for us. We feel better. We're able to do more in a healthier way. And I think about those days where, you know, a baby could be up all night with a cold or with teething, and you're waking up and you're behind the 8 ball already because it's just raw and exhausting. And this idea of knowing that you can start out slow and pay attention to your body and give it what it needs while still meeting your baby's needs. And I'm sure you can think of many nights that you've woken up with less than even you get on a regular basis after a particularly rough night. What are some ways that you take care of you on the days when even what, you know, a reasonable goal or plan that you had for that day has to kind of go by the wayside?
Yeah, so this is one of my biggest pet peeves right now, especially on social media. You know, you see all of these fit influencer and posts around how critical sleep is and you've got to get 8 hours. And every mom or parent is just like, haha, that funny joke. Like, I can't get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And it's so frustrating. And I'm right there with you because I don't know the last time I got 8 hours of sleep. So I just want to say it's okay. It's okay if you're not getting that optimal sleep. It may come back to you in the future. But then it's also important to, as you go into your workouts, reflect on, okay, well, what kind of sleep did I have last night? What kind of energy reserves am I taking from? So when I work with clients, you know, we always do a check-in, like, how are you feeling today? How did you sleep? And if they're like, my baby was up all night, just because, as my daughter is often, then maybe we dial down the intensity. Maybe we're not lifting as heavy. Maybe we're not doing as many reps. And then it's also important, you know, if you're working out on your own, to have that autonomy to be able to say, you know, today is not the day to do the high intensity stuff. Today, I'm going to move my body by a walk, a bike ride, like something gentle, something slow that you can't force what am I trying to say here? You can't just go when you haven't had that adequate rest. Rest and recovery is so important. And when you're in this stage of life where sleep and recovery is already being affected a little bit, knowing that you may have to adjust your training and your exercise to accommodate that so that you can stay in sort of that optimal as optimal, healthy position as you can be. Sure, you could sort of push through if you had a crappy night's sleep and do your intense workout, but that's eventually going to catch up to you. So again, I think it goes back to that letting go of guilt, acknowledging where you are, and knowing that that's for right now. Things will be different in the future.
I love that. There's that phrase again, right now, like in this moment. What
Yeah.
is it you need? What is it you're capable of doing? And I share with you that dislike of the social media that says, it's fear mongering around the sleep piece,
Yes.
which quite naturally and comes with the territory of babyhood. They are, I'm already fighting the narrative around what babies should be doing with sleep. And then that secondary layer is this fear that not getting the 8 hours is going to cause long-term chronic health problems, even though the sleep that their babies are getting, which is variable. Some babies do sleep really well. I don't know any of them, but some do. And for many of us who have babies that are falling more into the typical or a challenge sleeper, it does not mean all is lost. It means dialing in, as you say, to what are the priorities right now? What are you capable of? And perhaps even what came up for me as you were talking, Jessica, was this idea of loving movement, like to give your body the gift of movement at the stage that it can benefit from in that particular day.
Yeah, that's so true. When I think about how do you create a habit that is long lasting and sustainable, it's doing something that you love, right? So maybe you don't like to lift weights, maybe you want to dance or play softball or ride your bike. Like, you need to find that thing that excites you and helps you stay active and stay moving, because it's different for everyone, and enjoying it is critical for it to be sustainable.
Well, and you can't see the smile on my face as you describe the idea of picking something that you enjoy, which frankly can change so much over a
Yes.
lifespan. And when we look at parenthood as being this huge shift, I think about, I used to do triathlons, not as, I wasn't very fast. I was always just competing against myself. They made me feel good. I did one triathlon after having babies. And it was great. I felt so proud. But when I look at where can I put my energy and really enjoy movement without feeling stressed about, as you say, like starting with the bar too high, I can return to triathlons later. There are lots of women in their 50s and 60s doing triathlons. It's one of those nice sports that can cross quite a large spot of the lifespan. But right now, I'd rather be, I have weights at home. I don't need to drive to the gym at this point to get a workout that feels really good to me. And yes, that will change over time. But in this moment, right now, what meets my needs for movement and gives me joy? And I can tell you, oh my goodness, Jessica, if you had talked to me a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to express just how nice it is to find something that's relatively new to me. So this wasn't something I was doing before becoming a parent, but that gives me joy with the movement.
I love that. I just love, how can you bring joy into everything that you're doing, especially movement, and breaking down the idea of what counts as exercise is also important. It doesn't you don't have to go to the gym or do a HIIT class. There are lots of things, just walking with baby who's heavy is movement. Dancing with your kids, playing around at the park. I think I'm starting to move into that next phase with Ruby of, well, how can I get my movement with Ruby? Can we go on bike rides together? And I think these are things to think about as a parent. It doesn't, when you think about exercise and movement, it doesn't always equal 1 hour away from my family at this specific place. It could be going for a hike with the whole family, right? Like, that is exercise, that is movement. And how can you make this a family affair? Again, take some of the pressure off. Oh my gosh, how am I going to fit in this extra thing away from my family?
Right, right. Well, and I love that. One of the reasons that I had wanted you on this podcast was because I knew you brought that balance of being very attachment oriented and focused on meeting those social emotional needs for connection with your daughter, while simultaneously valuing and understanding the benefits of having of creating some solo time in ways that really rejuvenate you and are doable at particular phases of parenthood. And I think that's such an important balance. It's never or, it's always and. Like you can create movement habits with your family, which is you can add in all those layers of creating a family culture around health and around treating our bodies well, and not or but and be able to step away when at particular times where it's possible, particular stages of development, or when family lifestyle and means allow, to be able to step away to do some solo time, whether it's meditation as you mentioned, or picking up weights, or doing something on your own. And I just think it's so valuable to remind ourselves of that we're all creating our own story of how our lives are created, and there's no one size fits all. But hearing examples like yours of just how varied it can be and how much it can change before parenthood, during that first tumultuous period of early infant development in the first year, and of course beyond.
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because we've covered a gamut of things from, you didn't put this in words, but that mind muscle connection post pregnancy, where we're really trying to get that connection, and particularly of the core muscles and the abdominal muscles. And we've talked about how to goal set and how to manage from the lack of sleep and still be able to prioritize ourselves. I wonder, when you look at the support you give to clients, whether there's a common theme that comes up that a lot of parents that you work with are challenged with, that you would love to highlight, so that people either understand that they're not alone in feeling that way, or it may just add a new perspective on how to take care of their bodies while they're taking care of their babies.
That is a great question. I think something that I hear a lot is, I feel broken. I feel like my body isn't mine anymore. And, just, you're not alone. Everyone, so many of my clients feel that way. Like I used to have this body that I could control, and now I feel alien and separated from it. And I love that moment of, after working with clients, they sort of come back into their body and feel like it's whole again. And and it's an emotional moment. I've had lots of moments with clients where there's just tears of joy and excitement about what their body can do in terms of lifting weights, and feeling like, I never thought I would be able to do this again. I didn't think that I would be able to, run without leaking. And just that reconstituting or remembering of the body is something that I've seen a lot of my clients go through this. They start and they feel like, I'm sort of broken. I'm not who I was before in terms of physically what my body can do. And then going along that journey and teaching them that yes, you can come back even stronger, and your body is yours again in the end, is a common journey, and a reason that I absolutely love what I do.
Oh, that's amazing. I have, before I ask how people can find you and reach out to you, I have one question to ask you before that. And that is there something that we, like collectively, not you and me, but we are not talking about that you think we should be talking about more?
I think just in general, not trauma, but the whole, just the impact being pregnant and having a baby does and has on you, and how little support there really is for women or birthing parents after they've given birth. So if you think of if you had any surgery or injury, you would go to you would be prescribed physio and you'd have like a plan and you'd work with a professional and get back to optimal movement. When you have a baby, and like especially C-section, that's a major surgery. There's no support. Basically, you go to your doctor and they are like, okay, well, you can have sex again, but don't get pregnant too soon. And that's it. And then you're just shoved back out into the world. And I think there needs to be so much more support for postpartum women in terms of getting back to full functionality in a way that's supported and just honest in terms of how hard it is and how much of an impact pregnancy and birth really has on you emotionally, physically. There's just not enough conversation about that.
That's so important. And when I think about how proud we can be of our bodies after delivery, like what our bodies have been capable of, balanced out with the frustration and lack of support around this new body and new life that we're managing and navigating as parents. I think, gosh, this conversation around that support, because it's not one facet. It's physical, it's emotional, it's social, it's mental. So many layers go into this new role. So many layers go into rejigging the priorities we have. And it's not, I was saying it's always and instead of or. All these layers are important. And it's not that each layer, physical activity doesn't just get us a stronger body. It's good for our soul. It's good for our emotional health. Everything is so intertwined that if we're supporting parents through that lens of being able to give them support through this transition that they're going through, then so many layers can come together that in the end help that parent be able to adjust to things and to thrive. And if that parent is thriving, that analogy of the oxygen mask again, then their baby is more likely to be able to thrive too.
Yes, so well said.
Can you let people know, Jessica, where to find you? I didn't even say that you were in Toronto, but you are in Toronto and working online, of course, and in person. But if people are wanting to find out more about you and about the one-on-one and group support that you give, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at jdarling, it's my last name, or you can visit my website at movement.ca, MAUVEMENT.ca. And yes, I do online virtual sessions, online programming, and if you're in the Toronto area, I also do one-on-one in-person sessions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jessica, for spending time with me. This has been such a nice conversation.
Yes, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Heather.